Sovereignty, CKS, is more than a decade-old independent
global presence with Chinese economy, diplomacy, and political.
All have guessed right. The country's red dragon, China.
CKS is more than a decade-old independent, non-partisan public policy think tank that works on themes related to knowledge sovereignty, data sovereignty, security, and sustainability in India. CKS is led by a decorated veteran, General Dr. D.B. Shekatkar, former DGMO and head of Shekatkar Committee of Defense, as its chairman, and General V.M. Patil, a decorated veteran and former DGMO, as its vice chairman, and Mr. Vinod Goenka as its secretary. CKS has been organizing roundtable discussions, conferences, seminars, and talks on issues related to national security, national sovereignty, and related aspects. And this webinar series, Thus Spake Generals, is one such initiative of CKS. This series, conceptualized by veteran AVM Pranay Sinha ji, focuses on issues related to geopolitics and national security. Talks on these issues were delivered by honorable dignitaries and veterans, including General PR Shankar, General Sanjay Kulkarni, General Ata Hasnain, Admiral Sekhar Sinha, and Air Marshal SS Soman during the first season of the talk held between June to July in 2021. We had talks by veterans AVM Dr. Arjun Subramaniam, Air Marshal Anil Khosla, General Deependra Singh Hooda, General Zamiruddin Shah, and Admiral Anil Chopra during the second season of the talks series held between October and November 2021. During this current season, Season 3, the first talk was delivered last week on March by veteran General Syed Ata Hasnain. And forthcoming series will have talks by veterans General Shokin Chauhan, Air Marshal D Choudhary, Admiral S Shrikhande, Ambassador Sajjanhar. As a part of this third series is our today's talk on an extremely vital and interesting aspect on the China's upcoming issues as just mentioned. And this talk will be delivered by veteran General Dr. Rakesh Sharma. I take this privilege of introducing our speaker for today's by our very highly decorated veteran, General Dr. Rakesh Sharma, PYSM, UYSM, AVSM, VSM. In his 40 years of illustrious career, post-commissioning in Gorkha Rifles in 1977, has had extensive operational experience in Jammu and Kashmir, Northeast and on Western borders. General Rakesh Sharma commanded the Fire and Fury Corps in Ladakh, facing both Pakistan and China. General was the Adjutant General responsible for the human resource management of the Indian Army as well. The officer had trained Botswana Army for 3 years in Africa and attended the National War College at Abuja in Nigeria. He is an alumnus of NDC New Delhi and research fellow at IDSA and has done his PhD in defense studies. He is a regular participant in seminars, lectures, and talks in various institutions and platforms, and regularly writes in periodicals including newspapers, magazines, military journals, and contributes chapters to edited books. He is currently on the Executive Council of the Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis and Global Counter-Terrorism Council, and is the Distinguished Fellow at the Vivekananda International Foundation and for Center for Land and Warfare Studies. I now request Air Vice Marshal Pranay Sinha sir, VSM, moderator of this session, to take the program further. Viewers, AVM Pranay Sinha sir, in his 35 years of distinguished career and service, has held various important designations and appointments, and post-retirement has worked as advisor for Bharat Electronic Limited for over 3 years, and is currently very active member of our think tank. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, madam. For info of all, Dr. Nagratna is the legal eagle of CKS India, Associate Professor of Law, NLS Bangalore, and is expert in cyber law. A very good evening, viewers. Today is the 17th day of ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. Negotiation talks are on amidst continuing guns, missile, rocket fire. One of the outcomes is certain, that both victors and vanquished will be bruised very badly economically. But then appears to be one country that is going to emerge economically stronger and would be enlarging its sphere of influence in this fast-paced global geopolitical realignment of world order. Yes, you all have guessed right. The country's red dragon. US is softening its stand towards it. Russia is more dependent on it. Your strongest allies, Saudi or UAE, are ready to engage with China in a very big way. The energy-hungry China's son of heaven, Xi Jinping, is smiling. His dreams of Tianxia, China to be the center of world under heaven and develop a political system for the world with a global institution in place to ensure a universal order getting realized. It's time to rejuvenate the Chinese nation to fulfill its unfinished expansionist agenda. Xi Jinping has amassed all authorities to himself. He heads party, government, and military. And by the second half of this year, 2022, in the 20th Party Congress meeting, he would be handed over the next 5-year term. But then a contrarian view is also emerging, is evolving. Its real estate sector has collapsed. Its private technical sector is under onslaught. Chinese developers and manufacturers are going bankrupt. Economic slowdown reality. And to solve this Chinese conundrum, to decode its global ambitions, let's hear it out. Keen China's observer, eminent scholar, soldier, erudite speaker, General Rakesh Sharma. Sir, over to you.
Thank you. At the outset, my grateful thanks to Center for Knowledge Sovereignty, Then Shekatkar, who was my boss, so I get a little worried about bosses around. I want to thank Vinit Goenka-ji, Air Marshal Pranay Sinha, for inviting me over for this talk today. Also, thank you, Dr. Nagaratna, for these kind words that you've spoken. It's a proud privilege for me to be associated with the Center for Knowledge Sovereignty and to talk today in the next 40-odd minutes or so. So, of all this, as you rightly pointed out, Air Marshal Sinha, that in all this game that is happening, and the war that is happening between Russia and Ukraine, Chinese are the trump card around. Of all the, despite the relations that the Chinese have with the Russians, and I just want to add a word to this. Chinese have intensive investments in Ukraine. The ports of Odessa and Mariupol are, and other ports are also being built by the Chinese corporations. They have a plan for a new Eurasian railway coming to Ukraine. There is also a large amount of import of the engines. Ukraine is a very large producer of engines. Motor Stich as a corporation, and the Chinese are having great trade. In fact, last year, 2 years ago, they were wanting to buy this corporation called Motor Stich, and the Americans put their foot down. So there is intense amount of trade. The Chinese are interested both sides, and also because the Ukraine was known as the granary of the world. The wheat being produced in Ukraine and China were of large quantities, and the first, second, or third large producers of wheat in the world. China will be a gainer in this whole game, and then of course we will debate subsequently when we come to Q&A. I talk about today on Chinese global ambitions and what President Xi Jinping said, Ming, my dream is of a strong nation. So China's geopolitical aims and global ambitions are not a secret. President Xi desires to make China the preponderant power in Asia and eventually the world. He wants to consolidate China's control over important lands and waterways and achieve the glorious history that was lost across in the century of humiliation that was 1839 to 1849, when China was ripped apart by imperialist powers. The areas that China certainly wants to control in its periphery are Hong Kong, Taiwan, the territories claimed in India, and about 80% of the East and South China Seas. The Chinese dream is closely associated with President Xi Jinping. The first time President Xi sounded this word dream, we used to talk about American dream earlier, but first time he said about Chinese dream was in November 2012, shortly after he became the General Secretary of the CCP. He said, the Chinese dream is the rejuvenation of a Chinese nation. Since then, it became an embodiment of the complete leadership's political ideology. In the 19th Party Congress, which happened in 2017, he threw up another word, Chinese dream in the new era. And the new era is what is passing through now. The Chinese dream corresponds with this idea of restoring earlier dynasties' lost greatness and all the origins of the Chinese greatness that they had. And he exhorted young people to dare to dream, work assiduously, fulfill the dreams of the nation, and revitalize the nation. Now, the Chinese dream had many issues. He said there should be a strong China, there should be a civilized China, or harmonious China, and a beautiful China. And then he said by 2020, we should have a moderately well-off society, and by a fully developed nation in this 100-odd years since independence at about 2050. The prime question is, how is China redeeming itself towards this past glory? What role does China want to perform in the global stage? If they want to desire a superpower status, there can be two roads to go there. One is, it runs through its periphery, the lands and the maritime frontiers all along it. It focuses on its establishment of a regional hegemony or regional primacy as a springboard to global power. And second road, which goes ahead, brings a position of unassailable strength beyond Indo-Pacific, outflying the US alliance system and present a global presence with Chinese economy, diplomacy, and political influence on a global stage. Now, the emerging conventional wisdom and the events of the last 2 decades have clarified many things. That China is attempting to establish a global influence by first establishing a regional hegemony. This doesn't mean that it wants to occupy the neighboring countries, except, of course, the potential exception of Taiwan. But it does mean that China wants to become a dominant player on the territorial frontier and in Indo-Pacific and get out of the first island chain. China has a very poor geography. It is bounded on the maritime frontiers by the island chain, which is from Japan to Taiwan to Philippines and on to South China Sea and Southeastern nations. It wants to break through the first island chain so that it's able to proceed further ahead at lib. So it must gain an effective veto over the security and economic choices and policies of all its neighbors. It must rupture the alliance system that the United States has in this area with Japan, with Taiwan, with South Korea, and other nations. And if China cannot do this, it cannot sort out its periphery, it will be persistently confronted with security challenges. And it will have to focus its energy first to sort out the periphery before it wants to become a global power and create global influence. So long as the United States retains a strong military position in the first island chain, regional powers like India, like South Korea, Vietnam, Taiwan, Japan will all resist China's rise to that position that it wants to go to. So simply put, China has to cannot be a true global power if it remains surrounded by inimical territories. No global power can allow itself. This is one of the reasons why Russia is having this war with Ukraine, because it now is suddenly down to Russia that they are having inimical powers all around it. And you have inimical powers, you are not able to proceed further to influence the world and influence the periphery. So that is the same issue China will have in case its periphery is not in with nations which are supportive of Chinese efforts. And United States, as you are aware, have got a number of allies. It has security partners, bases, military outposts. There is a Quad grouping that we know about. So in the recent years, these voices of Chinese global ambitions have become more and more articulate. Like that Politburo member, Yang Jiechi, who used to be the previous foreign minister, and he's a Politburo standing committee member. It said that for national rejuvenation, to provide an important guarantee for us to lead the world, we have to shape the external environment. Let me examine this into 4 parts. First is, there is an increasing talk about in China of late in the last couple of years about sovereignty and sovereignty claims. How does China want to talk about sovereignty? Does it want to redraw the geography? Second is the attempts of China to gain global influence. How is China trying to gain global influence? Third is, there is a mention about Air Marshal Sinha spoke about China insulating its economy from the global one. How does it happen? And fourth is, what is Chinese involvement in the global governance system, like the United Nations and the Bretton Woods institutions, etc. These 4 aspects I wish to build on subsequently. And I will also, in short, cover about India and China, which has been advised to do. Having commanded 14 Corps, that's a subject which is close to me. So China's prioritization of sovereignty is rather new. till Qing dynasty was around 1912, there was a loose states, a vassal state. You would be paying some kind of tribute to Middle Kingdom, but not that China was able to control all the vassal states, the areas of Mongolia, Inner Mongolia, Xinjiang, Tibet. These were not Chinese territories. So this is, they were just paying tribute across to Middle Kingdom. So very notion of sovereignty was foreign and did not gain prominence till the time the European colonial period came through. The foundation of Chinese current doctrine of foreign policy comes up what was signed with Pandit Nehru and Prime Minister Chou En-lai in 1954, the Panchshir as we spoke about, or the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. And the first one is most relevant. First one of these principles says there should be mutual respect for each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty. This is the principle that he speaks about and follows to the least. Any understanding of the recent events must start with the strident approach President Xi Jinping had taken towards sovereignty. In early 2013, about a couple of months after he took over as General Secretary, he linked sovereignty with the accomplishment of the Chinese dream. And he said, no foreign country should expect to trade away our core interests or expect China to swallow the bitter fruit or relevant to encroachments on sovereignty. In 2018, when US Defense Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis visited him, China said they will not lose even an inch of territory left behind by our ancestors. What about the sovereignty claims of the other nations? China doesn't talk about. In practice, China's renewed emphasis on sovereignty is evident in Chinese actions on its neighborhood. China has claimed vast swaths of land, reefs and atolls and on various islands to build military bases in the South China Sea, while instituting patrols by Coast Guard, making new Coast Guard laws, making new border laws, all suitable to itself, not bothered about other claims into the same territories, and also disputes the islands with the Japanese in the East China Sea. It has taken a strong grip of Hong Kong as against the treaty it signed with the British, while increasing pressure on Taiwan, thereby curbing the island's attempt to participate in the international. So China's sovereignty issues are most important, and they go beyond territorial disputes. This is a newly emerged trend in the past last 2 odd years, and we need to take distinct notice of this issue about sovereignty. China's talking about sovereignty, it also talks about cyber domain, where very funnily says the Beijing official strategy for cooperation in cyberspace calls for international cyberspace order on the basis of state sovereignty. A new formulation altogether. But activities of the world means a much looser definition. In 2001, it was stated that India had 40,000 cyber attacks against India, largely emanating from the Chinese soil. So while on its own it talks about cyberspace and sovereignty issues, it undertakes cyber attacks, all these firms that he has called APTs, etc., which target India and which we have to protect against. So Chinese activity in the world around means a much looser definition on violation of sovereignty. Sometimes it outright dismisses the issues of other nations talking about their sovereignty. There is a dichotomy here. President Xi Jinping declared last year in the month of July that those who get into the way of Chinese ascent, means Chinese rise, and imagine the words he used. He said anybody who wants to get into the ways of Chinese rise will get their heads smashed bloody against the Great Wall of Steel. Very offensive, ominous sounding words. The Chinese Liberation Army is churning out ships like no other nation has created ships since World War II. And then, of course, constantly goes across to the ADIZ of the Taiwanese and with all the neighbors. So apparently, China is a revanchist power, an ambitious power, an expansionist power, one that is determined to make China whole by reuniting Taiwan under it, the mainland, making East China Sea and South China Sea as their own lakes, and attempt to grab lands which it claims to be its own as a regional primacy as a stepping stone towards global power. This is what we have to watch about. Second is the issue about Chinese global influence. Now, Xi Jinping's call in last year, again in the month of June, was that I want to be a country that is credible, lovable, and respectable. Why? Because it seems that it suggests Chinese leadership is recognizing that it doesn't have the soft power. It has a soft power deficit. If there are 130 odd countries which have the maximum trade with China, and Chinese have got so much of influence across the economic front and the trade front with many countries, with large number of countries, it still does not have that lovable quality, or it doesn't have that credible quality. So Chinese ability to influence the behavior of international actors is often less than what we believe. Although it has a significant success in using economic leverages to persuade many nations and multinationals to accept its political preference. So it has much lesser long-term control, and that's the influence issue which China wishes to achieve. So not very long ago, China was deemed as a regional actor, kind of a regional power, with predominant emphasis on its proximity. In the span of last 20 years, more so in the span of since 2008, China is establishing itself as a global actor. It has solidified its interests spanning the globe, and it has the capacity now to act on them. Its presence is felt in each and every corner, from South Pacific to South and Central Asia, to wider Middle East, to Americas and Southern America, and the points in between. So in 2019, Chinese crossed the number of diplomatic networks that it has in the world, crossed United States. It cited that it has 276 diplomatic posts, including embassies and consulates and permanent missions and international organization representation. And its foreign aid budget has also been rising subsequently. It, as you are aware, started the Belt and Road Initiative, which was ostensibly to make infrastructure, but planning to spend many $1 trillion on this one. It is about 7 times the size of the Marshall Plan of the earlier times in real dollar terms. And of course, this initiative seeks to build new markets for Chinese goods, for Chinese people to go and settle outside, to increase Chinese economic activity to 130 odd nations. And it encompasses nearly 60% of the world's population and about 1/3 and more of global GDP. It includes 40 of the 54 nations in Africa, where China has already invested in large way and infrastructure has been developed. The PRC's global investments have grown dramatically in the recent years, surpassing United States as the largest trading partner in Latin America and Africa, and challenging America's strategic influence across the globe. From official investments in infrastructure, in aerospace, in power, in investment in 5G technologies, China is pledged to become an economic world leader by 2025 to global manufacturing alone. Under its, it's got a plan called Made in China 2025 and China Standard 2035 plan. It wants to stand up global standards of its own in the next generation technologies, which includes from telecommunication to artificial intelligence. It has far-reaching implications, and it is turning itself into an innovation economy, bypassing what it was as a manufacturing hub. Even COVID-19 has also worked to highlight Chinese efforts to global influence, from bilateral humanitarian response to outbreak, despite the criticism it got from various countries of having the mother of the virus, and obviously so there is no, it's undeniable. But its humanitarian response to various countries was tremendous. It sent medical teams, it sent medicines to over 150 countries. It joined the COVAX, the global initiative to ensure equitable distribution of vaccine, and even before the United States did so. So estimates indicate Chinese economy may be falling down. China may have a great demographic problems coming up. It's got an inward-looking economy as it goes across, but its effort to influence the globe are not receding into the background. My third part is Chinese influence into the global governance system. Now, let me give a short pass. In 1970, China was nowhere in the global governance system. It had a very weak role. It was participating in the world order, which was established, a rules-based order established post Second World War, including the financial institutions. In October 71, the General Assembly, United Nations, voted to admit PRC as permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. Following Mao's death in 76, it started joining many of these international organizations, but remained a fringe actor, a weak actor. By 1977, by the end of the 70s, it had about 20 odd organizations with Chinese nationals, but there were no Chinese nationals in senior positions in the international governance. In 70s and 80s, when Deng Xiaoping came to fore, the Chinese joined more and more global financial institutions and trade institutions, like the IMF it joined then, the World Intellectual Property Organization it joined, the Asian Development Bank it joined in the early 80s. By the 90s, it had embraced some kind of multilateralism integration because the economy started developing in a positive manner. It signed many of these multilateral agreements, which it was reluctant to join earlier. Till 90s, it had not joined the NPT, but in 92, it joined the NPT. It joined the CTBT, subsequently 96. It joined the International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights in 98. So by the first decade of 21st century, China was ready to play as per international norms and rules. As the economy grew, it got more and more assertive in the global governance, signaling that it has got a potential to lead and change the world order and change the global existing norms and institutions. It boosted its power in many ways. It took a bigger role in institutions, it increased its influence, it laid down some organizations, and it subverted many of governance rules. I'll cover many of these issues. By 2010, it had crossed Japan as the second largest economy. And, at that time, it got the voting rights, the third largest voting rights in the World Bank and the IMF. That made its power much larger. And it rose up to become heading many institutions. So Margaret Chan was appointed the Director General of the World WHO in 2006. And during the financial crisis of 2007 and 8 and the global meltdown, China was unscathed, relatively unscathed. So it thought it was the nation and the model that they were following is the best one. And therefore, it participated in a microeconomic response. It actually gave out $580 billion as part of the G8 summit plans to provide stimulus across the world. So it got more and more energetic in this role of doing things. And there were many more institutions which became dominating by Beijing as it came to the 2010s. Meanwhile, it established the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which was that time brought about as a counter-terror. And then, of course, it used to be Shanghai 5, then became Shanghai Cooperation Organization, expanded to Central Asia, collected more and more nations. So it has got its own something like a NATO established under the Chinese AGC. And it became a vehicle for Chinese challenge to global security norms. Under Hu Jintao also, this thing had started. When South China Sea became its vested core interest and non-negotiable, and it started saying South China Sea, that there are no other claimants, we are the only claimants there. It expanded its footprint in the South China Sea. It started building military facilities on the disputed islands, on the artificial features, made new islands. It expanded the aid around the world, started giving aid to many countries. So by 2010s, it had arrived into the global stage. Some of the priorities that Beijing promotes in the global governance are, it doesn't want Taiwan to come anywhere in between. It has to protect its own sovereignty against Taiwan. And it sought to make the global governance system to suit its own political model and economic development. So President Xi Jinping, later on called on more and more share to China for global governance. He said we have to lead the global governance with the concept of fairness and justice. Now, fairness and justice, it sounds like extraordinary words when coming from China. But that matter is that, at that time when Donald Trump administration came, they were moving backwards away from the Paris Agreement, from NATO. They were not very happy. So that was voids were being created which China was trying to push themselves inside when Trump administration was moving a little backwards. It was providing opportunity to China to gain on to this one. For example, there was a vice minister in Chinese cabinet called Fu. She easily backed out. She defeated an American supported candidate to become the Director General of the all-powerful United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. Today, of the 15 major UN agencies, China has heading 4 of them, which is quite credible. So it started creating its own alternative institutions also. These things matter. The BRI was one major issue was an initiative on its own, but its governance strategy also involved creating its own institutions that could manage its own. So in global health, it led the WHO for quite some time, and then thereafter it also, for example, Ebola virus, which happened in Africa, I think in 2014 or something, it provided a large amount of aid for humanitarian aid to Africa, West Africa, for Ebola virus. So there, and of course, subsequently I mentioned about coronavirus. There is also issue of internet governance. China sought to become a global leader in global internet governance and promoted the idea of that I mentioned, cyber sovereignty, which said a state should control internet within its own borders. A new philosophy was brought forward. In October 17, President Xi Jinping spoke about China becoming a cyber superpower, then became a cyber superhighway for BRI. It already has the maximum users of internet in China. Its company Huawei has the maximum patents per year for large number of years worldwide on the technological advancements Huawei has been doing. And then, of course, it promotes its own domestic cyber sovereignty. So it's its own internet system. It's got a national firewalls. It may want to retain the control of the Communist Party over these issues. And therefore, it blocks global search engines. It cuts out social media sites. It's got its own Twitters. It's got its own Weibos, and it means it has its own internet governance. And meanwhile, Chinese corporations like Huawei or CloudWalk, they supplied governments like Venezuela and Zimbabwe face recognition equipment, softwares, and started this digital Silk Road initiative. On climate change, also China has moved in a big way, though it has, like India, not supported the international fora on this one because it will affect our national growth. But on its own, it has made some beginning within their own country to sort out these issues of climate change within, because China was largely a coal-fired economy. It had to transit itself towards outside the coal thing, so they have made beginning into this one. And of course, the issue of developmental finance. Now, BRI was one method of providing global finance, but then there are much deeper initiatives being carried out on providing finance and finance basing security and political ties based in Africa and Asia, Europe and Middle East. And for doing this, it established the Asian Infrastructure Bank, AIIB, which is based in Shanghai, and it was the major lending institution as against the lending institution of World Bank and IMF. An own system was started by the Chinese of AIIB, which was providing financial assistance to many countries. So it follows its own lending standards and often competes with these world banks. Over the last 2 years, it's also making great progress into its power status in this manner. Now, in the economic influence, and rightly mentioned about the economy being changing in the new era, as Xi Jinping has said, but it has had credible work already established worldwide on economic front. It's got trade deals. 15 Asia Pacific nations have trade deals with them. He's got a trade deal with the European Union separately, which signals its own commitment of having trade. There is an RCEP partnership, which is another 15-nation body, a partnership which includes countries like China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand. So it's a broad-based organization on this one. And it establishes technological standard. Huawei, which of course many of the countries are now resisting because of security issues, is the largest telecommunication manufacturer in the world. While we may be opposing it, but there are many nations who are amenable to having Huawei joining. Their annual revenue of Huawei comes to $108 billion. Very large company. It's been banned by 12, 13 nations, but there are about 20 odd nations which Huawei has got great inroads made already. So there are large number of technology. In Latin America, China has invested through these banking systems $150 billion since 2005. So when you add all this together, there is a credible economic leverage created by the Chinese, in addition to the global governance leverage, as I mentioned earlier. It's in addition to it's sorting its periphery out on security issues. So there is a global ambition that is absolutely visible in the Chinese diplomacy. So before I come to India and China a little bit, let me state it this way, that there is a superpower ambition, and the superpower ambition is absolutely evident. And as United States has been saying, moving inwards more and more, China is getting an opportunity. Now, these opportunities are not given. The latest figures in demography, which comes out of China, says that the old age falling so fast in China that it is the previous statistic that came up last year was wrong. So the birth rate growth is so weak that the Chinese, and even when they said you can have 2 child or 3 children, people are now not able to afford having, because the cost of living having gone up high. They are not wanting to go across to beyond 1 child norm, or maybe no children. So there is a demographic, and now in this myopic economy, China is hoping for internal consumption more than external. That internal consumption will be fed across to old age society, which is not possible. So there are serious problems that are going to come up on the issues of demography. And second part is that because some of these corporations that became too big for their boots, the CCP felt that we had to rein them in. Minute you allow the oligarchs to go very big, then the communism loses its value. China cannot allow the Communist Party to go under or be weighed under the influence of big oligarchs like or corporations like Alibaba or Didi or Tencent. So they had to be reined in to protect the communist regime. And to do that, they had to insulate the economy, because it will cause immense amount of effect across in their trades in the global market. Now, recently, the stock exchange in Wall Street has actually curbed trading practices of the many of the Chinese corporations, because they said you're opaque. We can't read your books. So this all will cause immense amount of economic hardships across to China in times to come. How these ambitions will follow through in these economic hardship times that are bound to follow in times to come, that has to be seen and visualized. So those are the issues I wanted to raise. I just want to cover a little bit about India and China. India and China, the border issue, which actually is now common knowledge, but I'll just repeat it. In the 19th century, the British were the great game was played. They were so worried about the Russian bear, the big bear, Russian. It will come down. There were Russian Cossacks across in Xinjiang working there. So it decided to make an arbitrary boundaries. It said, okay, there's a McDonald line, which was based on a hill range called, mountain range called Kunlun Mountains. And it promulgated it. It wasn't decided between India and China, because China was nowhere there. There was a Tibet in between. And then, of course, there was a McMahon line in 1914, which was signed between Tibet and India as a boundary on the northeast frontier. But again, the Chinese were not privy to it and not part and parcel of this one. So the boundary, when we got independence, the Chinese got independence in 49, we got 47. Till 54, the boundaries were not decided before the government of India decided, okay, the McDonald line, which is the Kundun range line, which includes Exaichir as part of us, is what we got from the British as the line, and that will be an international border. We publicized it. But meanwhile, the Chinese acquired the Exaichir area to create a road which was later called G219, connecting Xinjiang to Tibet, to Lhasa. So that road was passing through this area, which wasn't so well known to us. And subsequently, the Chinese occupied Exaichir. There was a line proposed by Chou Enlai in 1959, which was well into our own territory in that time. And of course, they wanted a 20-kilometer buffer zone, no armies to be within 20 kilometers. All this was not acceptable to us before we came to 1962 war. And, there was some kind of offensive being carried out. They call it counterattack. God alone knows why Chinese call it a counterattack, but they call it a counterattack they did in 1962. And they occupied areas in Arunachal Pradesh, also partly, and Exaichir was occupied by them. And that is where we stood for 20 odd years till we come to 70s. And later half 70s, Prime Minister Vajpayee visited China. There was a little rapprochement which happened. In the 80s, there was a joint working group made, which had 18-20 meetings over 20 years on sorting out the border. Rajiv Gandhi visited in 1988. in China. That was a beginning of actually getting into some agreements, which was finally signed in 2003 by Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, which actually is a peace and tranquility agreement, and subsequently agreements were signed 1993, 1996, 2005, 2012, and 2013. So series of agreements, each aiming to bring some peace on the border, which actually implied that there would be mechanisms in which, if since the border was disputed, if they come into clash with each other, troops come to clash with each other, or they meet each other, they will disengage and go back to their own territory. So there is no heartburn around there, and each one claims will be sorted out by the political mechanism. So subsequently, when Prime Minister Bajpayee visited in 2003, the SR mechanism started, special representative. The NSAs of both sides started talking. Mr. Brajesh Mishra from India and Dai Bingo from China, they started talking. They had a series of meetings, but actually on ground to sort out the border dispute still happened. Nothing moved ahead. There was no thought process. In 2002, they decided, okay, let's do sector-wise. We can sort out the UP-Tibet border at that time, Uttarakhand-Tibet border, but actually did not proceed further. So the border remained like that. By 2008, I mentioned, the Chinese have actually come across saying that they have become big. They were not damaged by the global meltdown. They were a power to reckon with. Then 2010, they became the second largest economy. By 2014, by PPV terms, they became the largest economy in the world. And they were rising so high. So they thought, okay, we have the capacity to now sort out issues. So the clashes became more and more pronounced between Indian troops by 2010. 2013, I was in Ladakh commanding the corps. 13-14, there were serious instances happened, especially in Depsang Bulge in the area of Aksai, where there were clashes and there were, people, there was no disengagement. We did a quid pro quo and there were disengagement happened. So sporadic issues were happening from 2010 onwards. 2014 happened in Chumar. 2013, I said it happened in Depsang. 2017, it happened in Doklam. In 2020, when the Chinese came, this was not normal. Absolutely not normal. Why? Because China addressed us into large number of places together. It wasn't that it was one place that was being targeted. They came to 6-7 places and came and sat down. Not only sat down, but as per protocols, when we're supposed to withdraw back, they refused to withdraw back. The banner drills, nothing. They established themselves and became permanent in nature. Semi-permanent accommodation was being created by the Chinese into these areas, and they stood there like, about finger 4, 5, 6. And we used to go to finger 8. Chinese used to come to finger 4. Now they started permanently establishing themselves to finger 4 and 5. In Depsang, they did the same thing. In Bottleneck, in Hot Spring Gogra, this became a phenomena where troops came in contact. Then Galwan happened. When Galwan happened, Chinese had accepted to move back from Galwan in informal talks which happened at a lower level. They said, okay, we will withdraw. But when we went to check, have they withdrawn? They had not withdrawn from that area. That led to a clash there in which we had lost 20. And the Chinese that time said, later on, after 8-9 months, they said we lost 4 people. Chinese never tell how many people they lost at all. In 62 war, they never told us how much the Chinese casualties. World didn't know. In 1994, so many years afterwards, it came to light that the Chinese had 742 casualties in that war. The fact is, they hide the casualties because the public will get agitated. So the public should not know what's happening inside on the borders there, because PLA is invincible for them. Later on, now of course, later days, it's come that 38 odd casualties happened and maybe more. And this has been picked up by an Australian agency which is following the Twitter and other mechanisms. Their Vaibus and their system. So the fact of the matter is Galwan happened. And Galwan happened, it has actually led to total breakdown of trust. No trust whatsoever among forces. And we also noticed unimaginably, all against the agreements, Chinese brought more than 2 divisions. Division is the 15,000 large force, 10 to 2 divisions opposite Ladakh. This is not done. This is absolutely against protocols. You are not supposed to bring weapons close to the border. The distances are laid down. They violated. That led us to now gear ourselves for the next. And we geared ourselves. We occupied the Kailash range, as you are aware, in 29th and 30th. And the discussion started in serious matter as to how to resolve it. Many of these areas have been resolved. Now, The resolution mechanism is on in many ways. In many ways, it is still stuck into the manner it is because it is the negotiations are on. But actually, each one of these areas which have been resolved has been by creating a buffer. Buffer means a different level, different distances buffer. Like for example, in Depsang Bulch, Saichin, north near Dibyo, it will be about 3 kilometers. When it comes to Pegongso Lake on Fingers, it is about 8 kilometers. And Gogra, it may be 2 kilometers. So depending on that terrain and terrain features and how the heights and what distances that we have created buffers. There are discussions on, I'm told, on PP15, which is also near Gogra, where there is a Kurang Nala on which there is a dispute here, where we are face to face with each other. Similarly, in the Demchok Nala, this what is called CNN Junction, there is a face to face going on there. So there are many issues that to be resolved, and the Chinese are firming it. Now, having said that, it must be clear that even if the buffers are created, Chinese have not withdrawn their forces from close to our borders. Within 90 kilometers or within 100 kilometers, they are having 4 to 5 divisions, or whatever force, exact figures will not be known to us, but that many forces have moved from Xinjiang and created permanent habitat here. In addition, Chinese are now making villages all along the border, 624 villages. Some have gone inside Bhutan, some have also been made inside Nepal. And those villages are being constructed along the border, changing the demography of the borders. In 2005, there was a treaty agreement signed between us and China where we said habitated areas will not be negotiated. So he's changing the habitated areas across along the line of actual control, thereby actually solidifying the border in the manner it exists. So the whole belligerence and lack of trust exists on the borders because of what the Chinese carried out in 2020 and continued from 2020 across till date. That leads to us occupying also a similar posture along the borders, thereby denying the Chinese across into these areas. So that is what if the situation stands here. Their last meeting took place, I think 11th, that is yesterday, and it must be that some agenda would have been exchanged, some proposal may have been exchanged or denied, whichever way it is. It will come out in a day or two as to what things have transpired. So that's where, and this is for us to stay. Chinese also have a large investment in Gilgit-Baltistan, which is occupied by Pakistan, our territory occupied by Pakistan, where they are taking out uranium and they're taking out manganese and many other heavy metals, and they are establishing SEZ inside, close to Gilgit. They're establishing a SEZ called Mokpandas, huge SEZ, major engineering works. So the fact of the matter is that Chinese have got major inroads into Pakistan. That creates a security situation for India that we have to be mindful of, both borders, north and west, and we have to cater for it. I must put my 2 words bit on Ukraine and Russia, which is the hot subject today. People, we know the history behind it. Historically, the NATO had promised not to expand its borders, which NATO has done in over a period of time. There was a treaty signed between Russia and NATO in 1999, where they said, okay, there will be NATO and Russian rapprochement or discussions will take place, and there's a council existing. There are meetings that take place in the council. Ukraine, as you are aware, the word Ukraine means small Russia, and Belarus means white Russia, or in fact Russian language, Ukraine word also means outskirts. It's outskirts. Those issues. So that these are historic issues that have been continuing for a period of time. But then that's a subject of another discussion. I think the way it is going, it needs to be resolved at the earliest. It's got global ramifications. And the Chinese, who I've been talking about in the last 45 minutes, will be the major gainers in the whole game, because they'll come out unscathed. They have investments on both sides, in Russia and in China, good trade arrangements. Ukraine's largest trading partner is China, not any other nation of the world, not NATO, not European Union. It is, not NATO, not the European Union, not United States. It is China, because of their intense. The first aircraft carrier of the Chinese was given to them by Ukraine. It's called Liaoning or something. So the arrangements between Ukraine has got excellent defense industry, which they have inherited when they got independent from Soviet Union. So, there are trade arrangements here. We need to be watchful as to how the things proceed hereafter. And I think I will rest here and hand over to Air Marshal Sinha for questions as they are asked. Thank you.
Thanks, sir, for enlightening us on China's global ambitions. That includes its own defined sovereignty, its own global governance, which includes the cyber governance, which suits its own politics and policies, its way of defining global financing, whole system, its own lending system through BRI and other debt traps method it is using. And of course, it is going for the internal consumption mode to sustain this huge economy. And also, sir, thanks for taking us through the border impasse, revisiting us, and the negotiations are on. The hot topic of, sir, is the Ukraine and Russia, which you touched. And the first questions, in fact, two questions from our regular viewer, Mr. Dharmveer Jangra, is emanating from this crisis itself. He's asking, sir, will this impact our armed forces inventory? Because Ukraine Russians are on war and almost all, majority of the inventory is from the Russia. So will it impact our preparedness, our maintenance? And one more question, which is on biological line, that the bioweapon, which has biolabs, which are now under contestation and huge under the scanners. What should be our stand against this, sir?
Thank you. This is a very valid and logical question. Look, we have trade with Ukraine on defense matters, the Air Force and the Navy, larger the engines that we are getting from the firm called Motor Siege, which we get. We have also got arrangements with a firm called STE, from which we trade in Ukraine. And there are many parts here. For Russian side, we have the BrahMos, as we are aware. There is the Kalashnikov factory, which is coming up in Amethi, and there are many other arrangements. So the fact of the matter is that there is a problem. The problem is, how do we how does money get paid? How does the trade, even if we can transport goods across from there, how does the money get paid? Because the banks have all been put under sanctions. Most of our banks, which are located in the West, so for example, State Bank of India is located in New York. It just cannot trade with Russia. It will get closed down in New York and other cities that they are located. So any banks which have got foreign presence are not actually willingly not possible. How do we trade further is an issue here. Now we'll have to find either a ruble-rupee trade where monies are kept in the manner that it can be. We were trading earlier through the Russian Sberbank. The Sberbank is not being put under sanctions fully. It is the oil trade is still allowed through the Sberbank. Maybe we can produce it. I think this is a valid question. That it will not affect us is wrong. It will affect. It will affect us in times to come, because we will not be able to pay what we in the manner that we're supposed to do so. Even if we establish a ruble-rupee trade, it will take long time to establish itself. We had a similar trade with Iran, and I think we need to get alternatives sorted out and thought about it. But having said that, such wars will take long time. It will take 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. No, I don't think so. My personal opinion, and I wager into difficult territory here to say that the loss to the European Union countries of Russia Strait is tremendous. Baltic nations, they're all dependent. How do you start transforming overnight into liquefied gas structures and bring them across the United States? It can't be done. These are serious issues. There has to be a via media found. And maybe I'm speaking as a hopeful person, or maybe it's because of the analysis of it. I think in time it will. And the Russians have gone a very systematic manner. We should not follow what the Western press is giving it to us. Look, the Chinese cities are destroyed, and whole nation has been destroyed, and maternity ward has been hit. The fact of the matter is, the cities are not destroyed. We have seen cities being destroyed. In fact, due respect to AVM, the air power has been very scantily used. The capacities of Russia to take on missiles, they have destroyed Home, Aleppo, Raqqa. The cities in Syria were bombarded like anything. This has not been even 1/100th of the capabilities of the Russian forces because they did not want to get involved into this manner. So my short answer to this question is that I think there is no capture of territory of the kind which we have been saying. The political plan will actually succeed or may some reports be found and there will be positive movement here. Now the biolabs. Now see, biolabs are there. There is no denying the fact. They have been constructed in Ukraine with the help of the United States. There are some genomic labs. I do not know the people of Ukraine are same as Ukrainians are serving in Russian army. It's the same country altogether. So why have a genomic lab? Or why? So there are bio programs. I think the IAEA also recognizes it, and it needs to be watched. There is much hidden under the carpet on this issue, but it's coming out. And I would say it's both sides of the Dnipro River. Even if the Russians stop their offensives across the Dnipro River and don't cross over, there are labs on both sides, including a lab in Donbass, those areas. So there is need to be watchful on this issue. All news has not come out as yet on biolabs. There are these existing here. And I think what the Russians have gone in, and I will end here, is to occupy many of these areas which they thought could be damaged. For example, the nuclear plants or atomic energy plant. They're closed in, make sure that they don't get destroyed by inimical forces. There are so-called neo-Nazi regiments in Ukraine, like something called Azov Battalion, which are composed of people who wear swastika or Waffen SS, which is the Nazi symbols, and they have been banned earlier by the United States. They have been taken cognizance by the world, saying these are not good units. So there are inimical elements in Ukraine. I think we need to watch this as it progresses.
True, sir. It's a very fast changing pace, and yes, sir, air power is very minimal use. Maybe they want to avoid the collateral damage, or maybe for the last day, they want political solution. Sir, coming to one very, you raised the point of Gilgit Baltic and Baltistan and Aksai Chin. Mr. Rohit Deepak wants to know, is time ripe to take on the Aksai Chin back, POK back?
So, the map of India, which was brought about after the Article 370 was abrogated, has shown Gilgit-Baltistan and POK as part of a territory, as also Aksai Chin. In fact, Gilgit-Baltistan and Aksai Chin become part of Ladakh territory, and POK is taken on by Jammu and Kashmir. Now, the fact of the matter is that these are political bills. Wars are not fought by soldiers. We don't fight wars. We are soldiers. We don't fight wars. In fact, we hate wars. But then we are prepared for all type of wars. These are political decisions. This is a national decision. This is not even a ruling party decision to take on Aksai Chin. If a task is provided and the resources are there, we would create the capability to take on these tasks. Both Gilgit-Baltistan or Aksai Chin. We have to create the capability. But to have said that tomorrow you should rise up and move up and do all this, I think it's not done like this. This requires deep introspection, deep thought, the ramifications, and how do we achieve it. And we need to create the capabilities for it. So it's not tomorrow's job. If a decision is arrived at the political angle, the national consensus at political levels and nation, and there are national resources available, then of course we have to create the capabilities to do so.
So last question of the evening, I'll take, sir. Again on the rising global ambition of the China. Why and how USA failed to put checks and balances on this rising ambition? This is from Mr. Avani Kumar.
So very valid question. In fact, not only US did not provide checks and balances, US actually connived to assure himself that the Chinese will rise to that end. So if they had shown wisdom in 90s and the earlier part of this century, probably they would have been much wiser as to what's happening. They thought that if you include China into global market economy and Chinese get accustomed to middle class and more money and more luxury, and the children come and see how the West is staying, finally there will be an impetus to go across to a liberal democracy, some kind of liberal democracy. That actually the West or the United States did not understand the culture of that nation and the makeover of the government. So this was a serious mistake. Immediately when China joined WTO in 2001, they transformed themselves to that end of achieving that goal that they had. They had not publicized it. Deng Xiaoping, God bless him, said, bide your time, hide your strength. So they were only biding their time and hiding their strength. Once the West broke up in 2008, they put themselves into the fifth gear or maybe auto gear and took off. So last 2 decades, I would say till 2015, the Americans actually missed the opportunity of putting a check into them and allowed the Chinese to rise the way they were, hoping that they'll become a democracy, which they did not become, and they could not have become. So there is this issue here that they could not check. In fact, they did absolutely opposite.
Thanks to the Kissinger era, sir. Thanks to the... sir, now I will request Sri Vineet Goenka-ji, the main tank behind our think tank, an ardent champion of data sovereignty. He's authored a Data Sovereignty Pursuit of Supremacy book also, sir, and he is the governing council member of the Center of Railway Information System. Goenka-ji, all yours.
Thank you, AVM Sinha-ji. Sir, Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma-ji, what a illustrious. When you were speaking, I was just seeing through in my eyes what is going through and the way you have presented it very nicely. And I would like to thank you on behalf of everybody who is here. I would also like to mention AVM Pranay Sinha-ji and Dr. Nagaratna, who have helped me to put this show in. There has been presence of Wing Commander PB Shetty, Dharamveer Jangraj and others who have come and attended this show. And we have more than 500,000 people who have been watching us on various other channels, whether it is YouTube, LinkedIn, or not. But sir, one thing which you said, and I would like to reiterate before people see it, is that China shares boundary with 14 sovereign countries. So it shares, and out of that, only 3 countries it has major dispute, which is India, Bhutan, and Pakistan. So probably we'll have to consider and think about this and talk about this part also in the later stage. Why it does not have disputes with former USSR sovereign nations, whether it is Russia, Tajikistan, or whether it is Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, or why it does not have any dispute with Vietnam or Mongolia. Yeah, well, it has dispute only with Pakistan, Bhutan, and India on the land. So is it our soft approach, or it has been pursued softly? You be an expert probably in the next talk, if you can highlight us this particular part. Sir, one more part I would like to stress upon to the viewers who are here right now. Today is 12th March, and a couple of decades back, that was on 12th March 1993, we were targeted in Mumbai. Several bomb blasts happened in Mumbai, and then subsequently there were more attacks in Mumbai in 2006 and 2008. So as a country, if our people, our citizens, our students are not, my learning has gone up. I'm going back highly knowledgeable or more wiser than what I entered this talk room today.
Thank you.
Thank you on behalf of Center for Knowledge Sovereignty, on behalf of Lieutenant General Shekatkar, Lieutenant General Patil, and everybody who is there in this talk show right now. Over to AVM Sinha, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a ton. And we'll look forward for your coming and gracing our portal next time also, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Vinay. Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.